Hi everyone, welcome to another Musings on episode where I'm looking at album releases from a certain year. So at the moment I'm flip-flopping around the 1980s, and this episode I'm going to be looking at album releases from 1981. And if you've not seen this series before, the format's pretty much standardized now. So initially I'll start off by just looking generally at 81 through the lens of what was popular at that time in the UK charts. Now that's not necessarily the lens I was looking at music through in 81, which is where the second part comes in. So I'm going to go through albums that I actually bought when they came out in 81 and I still think have sort of stood the test of time, I still listen to now, still favourites. Once I've done that, I'm going to look at 81 overall and just talk a little bit about albums that took me a little while to warm to, but now have become favourites, or interesting albums that I've listened to maybe recently in putting together this episode, or albums that I would like to listen to just expand my sort of musical palette a bit, because I think it's interesting to go back in time and almost evaluate or muse over an alternative timeline where you're sort of thinking, well, for me, just using my experience in Insomnia, 81, I was knee deep in the WUBM, the new wave of British heavy metal. And in 81, as you'll see, several bands who had emerged sort of around 78, 79 were on about their second album. And then you've got these other bands that predate NWUBM but inspired a lot of the bands. Are probably 3-4 albums deep in at that point. So that's quite, 81's really interesting in that respect. If you're like me at the time, were into the new wave of British heavy metal quite heavily. So yeah, it's going to be interesting from that point of view. But again, within this video, like comparing it against what an alternative timeline might look like, and again, stuff that I warmed to. And then I normally finish it off with a little bit of a sort of pull back at, I suppose, what was going on in terms of films at that time, because I find that's quite a good secondary popular culture reference, for me anyway, is, when I'm looking at music, looking at what was the big films at that point. And for this one in 81, I'm going to be just looking at it at the lens of general releases, international, but mainly I suppose through the lens of what was doing well in the US, because in terms of the pages on Wikipedia, it's a bit easier to do that at this point in time. Later on, if you remember when I did the 90s series episodes, I was able to look at both the UK schedule and the US. I found the 1981's a little bit lumpy for that, so I'm just going to look at the US release schedule. And we'll talk a little bit about maybe videos. We hadn't got a video recorder in 81, or video player, but it is interesting to, as I'm doing it, to note when, I actually saw the film if I didn't see it at the cinema. Okay, so bear in mind when we're looking at these best-selling albums, we are looking at it through the lens of the UK charts, because that's where I was. But also some of these albums will be a carryover from the previous year, so they wouldn't necessarily have been released in 81, but it does give you an idea of the sort of musical landscape at that time if you were listening to more popular music or more chart music. So yeah, Riding High, Kings of the Wild Frontier, which was released the previous year. Again, I've pointed out this numerous times, you're going to see lots of greatest hits, and depending on certain years, sometimes that's more than others. So we've got Dare, which came out late in 81. I'm sure we'll get to talk about that. Face Values, 81. So we've got quite a few here from actually coming out in 81. Ghost in the Machine, 81. Didn't really listen to that much, actually. I think that's got Invisible Sun on it, stuff like that. Vienna was 1980. I mentioned that in a previous episode. And then you've got things like Elkie Brooks was pretty big around that time. So part of a compilation album. So you get some of these mixed compilation albums where, bands do this occasionally. I've seen it with Madonna, where they'll release a compilation album, but it also has newly recorded material, so it's sort of half and half. And maybe sometimes the newly recorded material then never ends up on an actual album. They're only released as singles. So they're always interesting albums to listen to, actually, because you get that nice hybrid of classic stuff alongside newer stuff. Yeah, we'll talk a little bit about this. I think Abacab came out in 81. Architecture Morality, 81, yeah, so quite a few here. I remember this came out in 80 because that got played a little bit when I was still in the sixth form. So I stayed on a year, as I mentioned before. So UK, you have some pretty significant exams when you're 16. And then you can choose, based on the exam results, to stay on 1 or 2 years, depending on where you want to go next. 2 years if you want to do A-levels and go to university, usually. So I stayed on a year to sort of clean up the mess I'd made of my exams I took at 16, or some of the mess I'd made. Not all of them were a disaster, but yeah, didn't do particularly well first time round. Took a second bite, really. So 81, probably about midway through 81, I started my first job. So I left school, it'd been about May of 81. And then sometime after then, in the summer, started working in a lab. And then by the autumn of that year, I was working there, but they were also sending me to college doing a BTEC in chemistry, because I worked in a prep lab preparing antimicrobic solutions for production. So, yeah. So that's just a general idea of the popular culture background plus what I might be up to at the time. Obviously, I'll be blending in stories of what I was getting up to in 81 as I go through some of these albums. So, start off with this, and this goes through roughly in chronological order as they were released. So, yeah, very much start of the year, I would have still been at school, and I can remember... first here is interesting because I'm trying to remember if I first heard Raven on the Friday Rock Show or on another rock show I used to listen to during the week. One of the what do they used to call them, the commercial radio stations, also used to have a sort of rock show. They didn't always play heavier stuff, and I heard the track Don't Need Your Money, I think. But also, sometime after that, they started playing some, or they'd recorded some sessions for the Radio 1 Rock Show, I think. So that's how I became aware of Raven. And this was their first album. Awesome album. Yeah, I have this in vinyl, actually. And probably on CD. And I think that the night I heard it, I was actually seem to remember I was sitting down doing homework. I can't remember which homework. I may have even been I was probably getting close to prepping for exams, actually, to be honest. Killer's second Iron Maiden album. That's probably one of my favourites, actually. At that point, I hadn't started work, but I was doing odd jobs here and there, so I had a little bit of money. And I remember going out and buying this when it came out. And just then, having few albums at that point, and then just playing it, because of that, playing it over and over again. I always loved that time of year in your sort of music discovery where you don't have an awful lot of money and you buy an album and you literally have to play it. We have no choice but to play it for like weeks on end until you get enough money to buy the next one. So that was case in point with this. Also, I got a little bit locked into some of the singles as well when they were coming out. So you'll probably will have seen, well, you will have seen already, My Life in Objects, where I looked at some Nawubum singles. And I have Twilight Zone, and I think I have Purgatory, pretty sure. I also had, at one point, I had the t-shirt for this. It's long, disintegrated. It's a pretty cool t-shirt, actually. Breaker. So very late in 81, I went to see Accept, supporting Judas Priest. And I was able to actually get this album. I had to get it on import. I had to have it ordered, actually, at the time. Yeah. And they were already, 3 albums in by then. They've been kicking around. They're a pretty early heavy metal band. First album came out in 79. And I was very impressed when I finally got to see them live, because they had this real sort of choreographed stage show, which really impressed me. They sounded great, and it was a really good gig. You got Accept, support act, and then Judas Priest circa Point of Entry, I think, was the album they were supporting. Hit and Run Girls' School, bought this when it came out. So here's pretty right in the middle of, I may have April, May, yeah, so I don't know quite, I think the exam started around May, so bought this just before exam period, I think. I'm trying to remember whether the exam period started in March or not, you see, but I think it wasn't till May. Okay, they did appear on Top of the Pops then. Right. So this was actually the first album I bought by Girls' School. I think I've mentioned before in an episode I did on Iron Maiden, specifically. The first album I bought by Iron Maiden was actually Killers, and then I retrospectively bought their debut album. Same sort of thing happened with Girls' School. I've been listening to them quite a lot on the radio, on the radio, the Friday Night Rock show. It's got Come On Let's Go on it. That's one of my favourites. I don't know, I think retrospectively over time, I think I prefer the first album to this, but I thought this was great at the time. Interestingly, there was even though I didn't have a car by this time, that didn't happen until 2 years later, I was still buying stuff on cassette. We had a really nice cassette player in the front room. My dad did this really nice. It was a very simple hi-fi with just a cassette player and a tuner, and that was it. And so I because that was really good quality, I was sort of inclined to buy some things on cassette, and I think I have this on cassette actually rather than vinyl initially. Oh yeah, Fair Warning. 1981. April. What's this got on it? Oh yeah. Unchained. Yeah, that's one of my favourite Van Halen tracks. You know, when I was out walking yesterday with my wife, we were sort of talking about albums that, are sort of all killer, all filler type things. And it's interesting, there's certain bands which I find that some of their albums, there's some sort of slightly weaker tracks on it. So we were sort of saying, you know, how stand out the first Van Halen album is, but some of their albums I find a little bit lumpy in that respect. But this one, from what I remember, which I'm pretty sure I do have this on vinyl, I remember particularly enjoying it. This is a weird track, actually, One Foot Out the Door. Yeah, I always find there's a little bit of a curveball track on a lot of their albums. The other thing is, there always used to be, I don't know if there are on these ones, but some of their albums always used to have really interesting covers on them. That used to be a bit of a thing back in the day for them, having a cover, you know, a cover of some famous track on there. But I don't think that was the case on this one, actually. Shock Tactics by Samson. So yeah, so whilst Bruce Dickinson was recording with Samson, Iron Maiden were recording with Phil Diano for the album Killers, which I've mentioned previously. And Samson were getting played quite a bit on the Friday Rock Show, Riding with the Angels, I think they played, and they maybe had a session as well. So I went out and bought this. This is a really good track, this track Communion, super long. But I really enjoyed this album. I think it was another one where I actually owned this on cassette. Okay, this is a bit of a weird one. So when I started work, and although I picked up this later in the year, it was still 81 when I did it, so it counts. And occasionally I'll put these in. So these are albums where I've listened to them a lot when they came out, literally week in, week out, but didn't actually own them until a little bit later. So those sort of count in my little world. So, and I wanted to put this in anyway, because this is how you can sort of get affected by other things. So this was the complete antithesis to what I was listening to. However, in 81, towards the end of the year, when I first started going to college, I used to go into college with someone else at work who was a little bit older than me by 2 or 3 years, I think, and had a car. So they used to give me a lift, mainly when we used to go in the evenings. When we went during the day, I used to go over the night before and stay at my grandparents' house and then go back there and then come back. But for the evening ones, when we used to go straight from work, they'd give me a lift out there and then sort of back. And they were listening to a lot of Duran Duran and Japan and stuff like that. So week in, week out, I got to listen to this album and then did end up buying it. But I knew this album as well as I knew the ones I bought, so that's why it's on this list as something from 81. Oh, this one, No Sleep Till Hammersmith. Yeah, I pretty much must have bought this the week it came out. There was a single that came out as well, which is Over the Top. Do I have that on picture? Yeah, I'm having trouble remembering now. Because that's Over the Top's not on the original album, is it? No. It's only on the CD reissue. That's interesting on the bottom single. I thought that was on its own. Okay. I'm sure they released a single to support this which had Over the Top on it. Don't know if it says here. Oh, yeah, 7-inch picture disc, yeah. On black, yeah. Doesn't mention there, does it? I'm pretty Oh, there's the B-side, yeah, over the top. That's better. Yep. Okay, so yes. So that album and the single. And a friend of mine had this on cassette. I've got the album version. I think mine is a misprint. I think the centre label's missing from one side, maybe. I think it's this album I've got. Well, that's the case. And it's not a double album either. It's just a single album. And you can see like it's Ace of Spades, Overkill, and Bomber. Oh, and yeah, sorry, they do have So What first 4 albums. Would that be? Yep. Because there's that weird album, isn't there, On Parole, which got released retrospectively, that they'd recorded with a Fast Eddie lineup, which had Phil Taylor was on it, and it was ended up getting released as an album called On Parole, and they'd released it by United Artists thing, and they held on to it, and then released it around this time period, I think, when Motorhead started having a bit more success. So yeah, there's this On Parole album which has a lot of tracks on it that are also on the debut Motorhead album, which got released, was recorded later. Yeah, I think On Parole, as it was finally released, may have even been recorded in 76. But I'll include links to all of these so you can look this up. I don't know if they're going to actually put it as Ace of Spades, Golden Years. Let's just go back. Oh, On Parole did come out in 79. So yeah, recorded in 76. So yeah, after Overkill and Bomber. Yeah. No, it's recorded 75 and 76. Fair enough. Lucas Fox, I believe. I'll leave you to read through this. You can drill down to find it. But there's a story around why Phil Taylor doesn't play on one track on here, because he went back in and effectively overdubbed the drums, because it had already been all recorded with the original Motorhead lineup. So that would have been Lemmy, Larry Wallace from the Pink Fairies, and Lucas Fox. And then Lucas Fox was out of the band. Phil Taylor came in during the recording of this, and then he re-recorded the drum tracks, I believe, and there was only that one track. Plus there's some bonus tracks as well here. There's some demos kicking around as well. You'll see often, bands that had stuff that was either released on Stiff Records or had an association with Stiff at some point. You might see Dave Edmunds' name come up a bit, and he was is an interesting sort of side association with a number of bands and people like him, and I'm trying to think of the other guys that were part of this band called Rockpile, who'd been around for quite a while, but for whatever reason got roped into the whole sort of pub rock, punk rock scene in the UK, or was sort of associated with it. And so you'll see there, when you're sort of looking at bands like Motorhead, who are sort of kicking around pre-punk, and have a fan base where there's overlap, you might stumble across some also like people that were involved more, or got, again, weren't necessarily musically part of, say, new wave necessarily, but just because they were around at that point and were involved with several record labels that were also promoting bands, that their names sort of come up. So interesting period from, I would say, 76 through to 79 musically in the UK, as punk comes up, takes a bit of a dive. You got new wave, you got post-punk, and then you got Nawubum. It's a really interesting environment. High and Dry, 1981. Excellent album. Have this on vinyl. Played it into the ground. So this is pre-Phil Cullen joining the band. Pete Willis is still in the band. I do have a soft spot for this actually period of Def Leppard, the first sort of 2 albums. Pyromania, it was sort of recorded in the transition where I suppose you could say Pete Willis had lost his way a bit, and during the recording of this album he gets replaced by Phil Collins from the band Girl. And so you can really hear the transition, I think, over in here, and then ultimately Hysteria. But yeah, this is still, this to me is this is an all killer, no filler. Some great solos on here. I always really did enjoy the interplay between Pete Willis and Steve Clark. Marauder, Blackfoot album. Yeah, I got into them around 81. And then bought, pretty sure I have Strikes. Not sure if I own Tomcatting, but I do own Strikes and Marauder. And this has, which is the one that has Highway Song on it? I think that's Strikes, isn't it? Yeah. So Highway Song is their sort of Freebird, I suppose you could say. Yeah, another interesting band with quite a longish history. So they predate. Yeah, 1975 was their first album. And this is where I stepped on and I sort of retrospectively got into them. I'm trying to remember whether I ever owned this or not. Made in Japan. I thought I'd bring this up anyway because it was an interesting live EP with the lineup here. Paul Di'Anno, Dave Murray, Adrian Smith, Steve Harris, Clive Burr. I don't have that actually. That's their EP chronology. Yeah, so that was a pretty quick follow-up to this. So, well, I say quick, yeah. So same year. First was Adrian Smith was on this album, previous album, different guitarist. And then we get into Number of the Beast which is, we'll get around to talking about it when I do 82, where Bruce joined. So again, it's like an interesting transition period here as we're sort of moving through. Yeah, final recording of the band. And this one. So I bought this when it came out, and then I think I retrospectively bought this. This is another one where, for some reason, I bought it on cassette. Not sure why. That's a really good album, actually, the live one. It's got Ready to Rock on it, Attack of the Mad Axeman, On and On. What's the slow one? Sure. Oh, that's right, yeah, Paul Raymond played on this, of course. Yeah, cool lineup. Cozy Powell on drums. And then this album, Allied Forces by Triumph. My brother owned this album, my middle brother. And then I had a copy of this as well. I think he had a copy. Yeah. They had 3 albums that I owned at some point, or well, let's say I owned it. So these 2 definitely. This one, my brother had a copy of it, and we played this a lot. What was After Never Surrender? So Thunder 7. So I have Never Surrender. A copy of Allied Forces, but my brother had a copy of this. Yeah. 3-piece. Right, sound really good. Okay, let's have a quick look in overview, talk about some other stuff. So this is a favourite of mine from this year, but I didn't buy it until a lot later, probably a couple of years after maybe. I'm not sure. Sometime between when it was released in 83, I think. But this is a pretty solid album. It's got guitarist on it is Paul Chapman. Certainly my favourite Paul Chapman album. And I used to play this incessantly. Anything else here? Do I have? I did buy one of these Cirith Ungol albums retrospectively, but I just don't remember which one, whether it's King of the Dead or whether it's Frost and Fire. But it was like years later. So they're pretty interesting listen. If you want to sort of, listen to what was going on in the US in 81 in terms of these sort of, bands that were incorporating sort of doom into their style and, power metal. Okay, Difficult to Cure, which 5th album. So this would have had, who was singing on this? Jolene Turner. So this did have I Surrender. So they had a couple of, what was it? I remember they had All Night Long, Since You've Been Gone, and then I Surrender, all in the UK charts. But I didn't buy this album until decades later, where I decided, in that period I've spoken about before, around about the 2000s, where I was sort of buying up cheap CDs on Amazon of people that were, offloading their collections after digitising them, I'm assuming. And I sort of bought the whole Rainbow back catalogue on CD, having owned several of the albums in different formats. I mean, over here I can already see I've got Rainbow, was it Long Live Rock and Roll? I think I had Rainbow Rising on cassette actually. Yeah, but I do remember this like at the time, but didn't own it when it came out. Fire Down Under. I didn't really keep up with Riot. I bought not the first album, the second album, Narita, pretty much when it came out. I have this, as you've seen if you've watched my episode on my 7-inch vinyl collection. Yeah, I forgot this came out in 81. So that will have In the Air Tonight on it. Yeah, I'm not a... Whoops. What have I done there? Not a big Phil Collins fan, but I do like the period he was in Genesis for. Killers, which we've mentioned. So this album, so my youngest brother was a big Judas Priest fan, so I never really bothered buying their albums until Screaming for Vengeance, which I'm going to talk about more in 82. So we had a copy of Point of Entry in the house, and as I mentioned later on in the year, I actually went to see them live at Crawley Leisure Centre with Accept Supporting. So I am very familiar with this album, because when myself and my two other brothers used to sort of hang out on a Sunday afternoon listening to music, this was one album we used to listen to, with this album cover. Yeah, not one of my favourite Judas Priest albums. What's the track I do like on here? So Heading Out on the Highway. The Hot Rocking's pretty cool. The video for that's really amusing. Oh, this is a cool album, but I didn't really get to appreciate this until 80, whenever. Well, actually, I didn't own it until the 2000s, because I think you saw that I did an episode of My Life in Objects on CD box sets, and I have a Hanoi Rock CD box set, so that's how I got to listen to this. But I didn't get into Hanoi Rocks until about 85, when they released, what was it, Up Around the Bend, that track, and I also saw them on the TV. My Life in Bush of Ghosts, I think I listened to that, but not at the time it came out. Yeah, you've got Eno, Fripp, pretty busy around that time. Journeys to Glory, debut album, yeah, wasn't really that much. Like I said, not interested. New Romantic scene was a complete antithesis to what I was listening to. However, I did have someone who used to drive me to college, and they used to listen to a lot of bands like Spandau Ballet, ABC, Duran Duran. Japan was probably my favourite, the one I warmed to quickest, because they have roots in, heavy rock, hard rock, glam metal anyway, or glam rock. So I've always liked the track Quiet Life and Life in Tokyo, but didn't really listen to this album at the time. Don't own it, never owned it. I've probably listened to bits of it, and of course it would have been certain tracks as that got to cut a long story. Yeah, so that was on the charts. Yeah, I mean, Gary Kemp's a really good guitarist, and I think I did probably buy this quite a long time retrospectively. The only album I bought when it came out by them was quite late on in their career, Through the Barricades, basically, which would have been 86. So, Face Dances, this is quite deep in their career. 9th studio album. Yeah, one of 2 albums with Kenny Jones. When did that come out? Because I remember that more from school. March 81. What's that got on it? You Better You Bet, yeah. So yeah, I'm pretty sure, I must have still been at school in March, because I remember that coming out, and a friend of mine who was big into The Who was kept on about it. I was always waiting for praying mantis to release something, and by the time they got this album out in 81, I don't think I didn't have enough disposable income at the time to buy that, and probably bought something else instead. But I did end up buying there was a single off of this. I think it was Cheated. Again, it's a single that I think I've shown on my Life in Objects episode. It's Breaker by Accept. Oh, I didn't know there was an EP by Pretenders out then. Chariots of Fire, Vangelis, that was pretty big at the time. Hardware by Crocus. I remember this coming out. It always felt like they released albums fairly close together around this period. So yeah, they had one a year. So I did own this. I owned this when it came out, but for some reason I didn't buy Hardware. But there was, I believe, was it? What did I own? Yeah, I'm unsure. There may have been I remember, like something like the Hardware EP or something like that I owned. But not the album, I don't think. Oh, I do have this. Why did I buy this? I don't remember why. I think I bought this because I thought there was a track on it that I'd heard on the Friday Rock Show, but it turned out there wasn't. Yeah. Freedom of Point Zero is the one that's got Jane on it, which is a really cool track. Come and Get It by Whitesnake. So they're 4 albums in by then, and that has, what does that have in it? Yeah, Don't Break My Heart Again. And who's playing on that? Oh yeah. So there's been so many iterations, I think, now of the Whitesnake lineup, but for me this is what I consider to be the classic Whitesnake lineup. Coverdale, Moody, Marsden, Murray, Pace, Lord. Spellbound. They had 2 albums out in 81, I think. And my middle brother owned both of them, but yeah, I didn't really... The one I listened to more was probably The Cage, but I'm not sure why. Probably because it had Actor on it, which I really liked. And the first album, there was a copy of the first album in the house. Wasn't one of mine. I don't think my younger brother had it on cassette. We used to listen to that a lot, but there were copies of these 2 albums, the second and the third one, which I think will come up later on in the year, which I did listen to, but I didn't keep listening to. I do have pretty sure I have a single by them from around this time. Does this have Don't Stop Back? Yeah, Don't Stop By on it. Gangbang's a pretty good track from what I remember on there. Oh, Future Shock. Now this had a pretty cool gatefold sleeve on it. I remember at the time. It's another one of those albums that I can sort of remember it being in the window of record stores. It's got a cover of New Orleans on it. And then there's the track No Laughing in Heaven. In fact, they had a couple of quite fast tracks. So New Orleans. And what was the one off of previous to that? Glory Road. What was on that? There was another. See if I can find the single listing. Yeah, I don't think that's going to work. Oh well. Sleeping on the Job. No easy way from Glory Road. Yeah, because I can remember when Glory Road came out. I didn't own it, but there was that thing about it having a a free album in it called For Gillan Fans Only if you bought it early enough, I think. And then, like I say, I remember seeing this in the charts. The first album I think I bought by them was probably Double Trouble, because it had the track Born to Kill on it, which is a bit of an epic. 9 minutes 28. I think, as you know, I tend to prefer longer tracks. There you go. Go For It by Stiff Little Fingers. Not really familiar with it. More familiar with the band than I am individual albums, if that makes sense. Twanging with Dave Edmunds. Final recording. So yeah, that's his British rock band. Pub rock, rockabilly and power pop. I remember his big hit with Girls Talk. Girls Talk, yeah. Probably just prior to this, maybe. Not sure what album that was on. Was it Repeat When Necessary? Oh, that was it. That big hit with Queen of Hearts he had, yeah. So this is probably the album that I'm more familiar with, not because I owned it, but it had more of the tracks on it. So Calling from the Wreckage, Girls Talk, Queen of Hearts. So if I was going to listen to a Dave Edmunds album, retrospectively, that would probably, the previous one would probably be the one I would listen to. I was also curious which one's got his cover of Sabre Dance on it, because he's a really good guitarist. I mean, really good. And under certain lights, he'd be considered to be like a proto-shredder, actually, I reckon. And he's been around for a long time. The Nightcomers by Holocaust. I did own this at one point, but quite a few years later. Punk's Not Dead by The Exploited. Is that their debut album? So we got a few second wave, I suppose, punk bands that are coming up around here. There's Shock Tactics, Hard Promises, fourth album by Tom Petty. We've got Computer Bell by Kraftwerk, which I didn't really listen to until sometime, I think, in the late 80s. Nightclubbing by Grace Jones, and I keep going on about this trilogy around this time. So this, I mean, I refer to it as the Compass Point trilogy. I don't know if that's the official name. So you've got Warm Leatherette is one of them, and I think, yeah, this is the third one. Yeah, so these were 3 albums recorded at Compass Point Studio. That's a really interesting sort of musical rabbit hole to go down. Like people that recorded at Compass Point Studio, the house band there, even things that people who live quite close to it. So yeah. East Side Story, where were they? 4th album by them. What does that have on it? Is that Love Tempted, labelled with love? Yeah. I didn't really own a Squeeze album until a lot later. This is a good album. So they were on their 2nd album by now. So yeah, Psychedelic first came out in 1980. Talk, Talk, Talk. I didn't really listen to them until quite late. This is the first album I bought by them when it came out. I did own a couple of albums before that, but I bought them retrospectively. I had a friend of mine that was really into them, but I really never got a chance to listen to them until quite a bit later. Hard and Heavy by Anvil, Anthem by Toyah. It's a mystery, and I Want to Be Free on it. May 81. Read by Black Uhuru, which has got a couple of people from the Compass Point house band in it. Sly done by Robbie Shakespeare, probably a few other people in here as well. I think Sean, wasn't he involved with Compass Point? Yeah, I'm not sure. Maybe I'm getting muddled up with his brother. Oh, there. Compass Point All-Stars. That's what I was trying to think of. Yeah, that's what they were referred to as. America, Juju Boy, Susan Bench's 4th album. It's got Spellbound, Arabian Nights on it. Cool album. Another one that I didn't really own until the 2000s. I did go and see Susan the Banshees sometime in maybe 85, 86, whenever Tinderbox came out. But it's funny, when I saw them, the tour sort of coincided with the release of Cities in Dust, and the album I think came out after I saw them. So I remember owning the Cities in Dust EP, like a 12-inch single. I sleep to Hammersmith, which I'd already mentioned. Fire of Unknown Origin. Now this has what on it? Oh, Burning for You, yeah. Thompson Twins, Six Pack by Black Flag. What's This For by Killing Joke, 2nd studio album. I didn't really listen to them until Revelations in 82. I was actually talking about this when we were having our discussion about classic albums with all stuff, and I was sort of thinking about albums which took me a while to really get into because I just wasn't prepared. And this was one of them. I bought this because of Empire Song. And it was quite difficult to get into this album. But this is what this was is a good one, actually. First 2 albums are really cool. I mean, I like all of their output, but some albums are better than others to get into the band, I think. Certain albums in their back catalogue, you know, if you've never listened to them before, you might get put off for various reasons. Either you might consider them to be a little bit too commercial sounding, or a little too more, you know, strange. So that's a good album, Pleasant Dreams. I'm not sure if I did buy that when it came out, but pretty close. And that has We Want the Airwaves on it, I think. Yeah. Okay. Well, this one, 2nd album he was on by then. So the albums where, in the UK at least, he got really big were Cuts Like a Knife and Reckless. And this is really when I became aware of him, because I had a friend of mine I used to hang out with and go to the occasional gig with, and they were really big into Bryan Adams around this period. I sort of got to know them around tail end of 84. And I remember when we used to drive around a lot, they used to play that album a lot. That one and one of the Eurythmics albums. So whenever I hear those 2 albums, I always sort of associate that with them. Time by ELO. What was that? 9th album by them. What were they releasing at that point then? Oh, Hold On Tight, Twilight, Tick of the Moon. Yeah. I'm more sort of familiar, I suppose, with their stuff from the 70s. Like around the time of Mr. Blue Sky and all the stuff either side of that, I suppose. Night of the Demon by Demon. I have this album. Yeah. Oh, Fire of Love by Gun Club. I do own this, but I didn't own it until way, way later. I can't remember how me and my middle brother discovered this band. It was quite a lot later. And And it may have been by association because Patricia Morrison was in the band, who ended up in Sisters of Mercy, and so was Kid Congo Powers, who played with Nick Cave. But I think it may have been just because we probably saw the Gun Club play on something like The Word or The Tube, one of the sort of Friday late afternoon, evening programs on Channel 4. So it's probably where that comes from. Was this the second album? Yeah. So there's this massive gap between Bad Out of Hell and this. And I do remember in the interim, Jim Steinman released an album. What was it? Bad for Good. But then this came out quite not long after, actually, which was interesting. Raging Eden, what are we up to now? 5th. Yeah, because that Ultravox, a lot of people don't realise, have been kicking around for quite a while. And that's because they've got this sort of really early period in terms of, there's a band called Tiger Lily. You've got their original singer, John Fox, who was there before Midjour took over as lead singer. So there's several albums with John Fox on them. So, yeah. But at this point, I don't think I even own Vienna. But, yeah, I'm not sure about that. Forces. Oh, we were watching Gregory's Girl the other day, actually, which has got Claire Grogan in it. Yeah, so this was recorded, this got big after Gregory's Girl, I think. She was in the film. Yeah, Stephen Severin. Where's it go? Mention. Yeah. When did that come out? April 81. So I'm pretty sure I saw that. I never know whether I did actually see it at the cinema or not. I think I did. I think I went to see it during the summer. September, so yeah, that album came out a little bit later. SG. Penthouse and Pavement, debut album. Yeah, that was another one. A friend that used to give me a lift to college used to play. I can't remember, did I ever own this album? Probably like years later on cassette, I suspect. Yeah, I already mentioned that. Chilliwack, they're a big Canadian band who I've never really listened to. Ghost in the Machine. Although my middle brother was a big Police fan and was buying albums as they came out, he never owned this one. And I bought the one after this, and then later on filled in stuff. Somewhere in the house is a copy of that. I think it's called Police Box, which has all the stuff on it anyway. So that's a really big compilation album. October, I remember someone that we had, I think I've mentioned this before, so the labs I worked in at that point, there was a prep area and we had like a full-time prep technician that used to do clean all the glassware, because it used to have to be cleaned with alkali and do multiple washes and be autoclaved and all these other things. So they had someone sort of full time to deal with all of that. And I can remember her going on about this band because her son was really big into U2 at that point. I had no idea who they were. No idea. I didn't really get to listen to them until sometime around the time of Live at Red Rocks or War, a bit later than that really. And then I had a few friends that were big into it, and then really mainly got into them around the time of Unforgettable Fire. And Masked by Bauhaus. I did own this album eventually, but I didn't really become aware of the band until after they'd pretty much disbanded. There's a couple of really good video things we used to rent out. One was a live Bauhaus gig, and another one was a collection of their singles. There's Dare by Human League. Yeah, I know this through. So when I started work, this had come out, and Don't Want You Want Me was released quite late in November of '81, and I just remember when we used to go down to the when sort of out and about various places, hearing this all the time, and to me it reminds me of Christmas because it was released so close to December. But I didn't own the album until a lot later. I think I've actually got quite a nice booklet version of this on like a gold CD, from what I remember. Greatest Hits by Queen. This came out. This has sold tons of stuff. Even though I was a big Queen fan, I never bothered owning this because I had all the stuff on it anyway. So yeah, I remember this coming out. Diary of a Madman. So I did buy this. I can't remember when I bought Diary of a Madman. It was a little bit later, but I did buy Over the Mountain, which came out as a 12-inch single or whatever. Don't Stop by Billy Idol, which was an EP. I didn't really get into him until around the time of whenever they re-released. So they did a re-release of Vital Idol where they put, I think, maybe some extra tracks on it on the cassette, and so I got into him then. Oh, Bow Wow Wow had an album out. Wow. Oh, Mob Rules. Yeah, that's a good album, but I didn't own it till a little bit later. I bought Heaven and Hell when it came out, but Mob Rules probably a couple of years later. Tonight I'm Yours, with the amusing bog brush, as we would call it in the UK, bog brush cover. Oh, Music from the Elder, wow. Movement, was that the debut New Order album? Yeah, I didn't buy that till a lot later. Renegade by Thin Lizzy, that's got, is that the second album with Snowy White on it? I think it might be, because he joined for Chinatown, didn't he? Yeah. So I did actually buy that when it came out. There was an opportunity to possibly go and see them live at that point. I'm rather regretting I didn't go because I never got to see that lineup. So. Well, I don't think I got to see any lineup of Thin Lizzy actually. Oh, there's Crazy Nights by Tigers of Pantang. So that's the two albums I released that year. Don't Take No Prisoners by Molly Hatchet. And in December we've got Welcome to Hell by Venom, their debut album. Yeah. The first thing I owned by them was the track Bloodlust, which I don't even know what album that's on, if any. they had a succession of like singles and EPs they put out as well. So yeah, this is, I have this because I think I showed you in a My Life in Objects episode. PT2, but not on the original album. What album is that? Second album by Unintentional. I don't think I've ever listened to this. They're a really good band if you've never checked them out. This is a really good album, the debut. That was the famous one with the sandpaper cover on it. But there's a later album which is what I got into them, and I just... Let me see if I can find it. Yeah, The Guitar and Other Machines. So I believe this album is one of the first albums to actually be released on DAT. I don't know if anybody remembers that format. Probably only crops up in recording studios now. So I'm not talking about DAC, which was what, digital audio cassette. So just around the time that was out, there was another format called DAT, and few artists did release stuff on it, but it was mainly used as, I think, as an alternative mastering medium in recording studios. Yeah, so, and then I subsequently listened to this at some point. It's on Factory, so Newdall's on Factory. Yeah, Vinnie Riley's guitar is basically the Dirty column. And then we got a number of albums which release date unknown. So I'm going to have a quick look at the 81 list of heavy metal albums on Wikipedia. See if there's anything I've missed. Yeah, for those about to rock recently, I didn't own this at the time, but I was very aware of it, and listened to it mainly because somewhere where my parents were house sitting for, they had copies of this on cassette, so we got to listen to it a lot. Night Flight came out. Now this one has got a really good track called I Turned to Stone on it, and I think that's the one with the, one of these has an instrumental introduction on it. I think it's this one, or maybe like an end. Yeah, I can't remember if it's at the start or the end, one of the two. Whether the track goes out and then this instrumental with a really cool solo on it comes in. Oh, I've forgotten about this. Yeah, I own this, the original sort of European release. Yeah. I say owned, I still have it somewhere. Stand Your Ground by Wild Horses, second album. It's got Brian Robinson on it, band he was in after he left Thin Lizzy. Number the Brave. Oh, this is a cool album, Earthshaker. It's got Hurricane on it and Rescue Me. I got into them around the time of Black Tiger, so 82, and didn't buy this album until a lot later. Starfighters, they're an Australian band, aren't they, I think? Oh no, maybe I'm getting confused with someone else then. And the Woburn Band. Shock Tactics I'd mentioned. The Rods, that's got some relative of Ronnie James Dio on it. I can't remember what his... Oh, that's it. His cousin. Played in Elf. More Warhead. I did own this when it came out. So there's a guy in this band, Paul Mario Day, and he had been in Iron Maiden at some point. Now he's a really good vocalist, But my understanding is when he was in Iron Maiden, he wasn't, I don't know if confident is the right word, but I did see some documentary where they're saying, yeah, awesome singer, but didn't really have quite the same stage presence as someone like Di'Anno, who came in later. Because there's quite a volatile lineup changes in early Iron Maiden. It's quite interesting to see their family tree. But I thought he was really good fronting this band. I did see him on the TV where he was fronting a band called something like Wildfire, was it? Does it mention it? Yeah, this band. They did a really good cover of what's the poem now? Is it Jerusalem? Yeah, I'm trying to remember who wrote that. But yeah, there it is. Sort of set to music. And I saw him play this thing. I didn't think he had any trouble playing, presenting himself well, but then maybe that was just obviously later on in his career as his confidence built up. So yeah, I have this album. Cool. Wow. Oh, Beyond the Valley of 1984 by the Plasmatics. I remember that coming out. Because not long after 81, I'm trying to remember when Iron Fist came out. So 82, and then there was that big bust up with Fast Eddie and Lemmy, because Lemmy wanted to record this single. I think it was a cover of Stand By Your Man by the singer from the Plasmatics, Wendy O. Williams, and Fast Eddie was having none of it, and so he actually left Motorhead at that point. Yeah, right. Box office number ones in the US, 9 to 5, Stir Crazy. I think a lot of these I probably saw on, these I always remember from the early days of having a cassette, a VHS player in the house, watching these retrospectively, like, Omen 3, Final Conflict, Star Wars, Excalibur, Happy Birthday to Me, Bustin' Loose, Cheech and Chong, Raiders of the Lost Ark, Superman 2. There's some classics out this year. Emperor Strikes Back, but it's a reissue. Yeah, I'm trying to remember when I saw that at the cinema, so 1980. Arthur, another one I saw on video. French Lieutenant's Woman, Halloween 2, Time Bandits. Time Bandits I did actually see at the cinema. And then highest grossing films, Raiders of the Lost Ark, On Golden Pond, Arthur Stripes, Cannonball Run, I remember that. Chariots of Fire, For Your Eyes Only. I think I saw that at the cinema. We had a bit of a run when I was around that time of going to the cinema to see James Bond films, so I probably did see that at the cinema. The Four Seasons and Time Bandits. I definitely remember seeing Time Bandits at the cinema, because I also remember they often mention, if you watched it, there was something else on with it, I believe. So I'm getting a bit muddled up here. I don't think it mentions it, but I don't know if people watching this of a certain age remember when you used to go to the cinema, going way back. There used to be often another film on, and there was another handmade film that was shown, I think, if I've got this right. But I love this film. I did go and see that, actually. Baron Munchausen. Might even be listed here. Oh, I do remember this. Oh, Venom I remember seeing. And The Burning. But they would have been on video a lot later. Yeah, this is a good film if you've never seen it, Long Good Friday. Oh, I should have watched this. It's good, yeah, I have to watch it this week actually, the week I'm recording this film, this video. Oh, yeah, definitely makes me smile. Yeah, one of my favourite films actually. Oh, I didn't know that. Ultima 2, 1982, wow. The Ultima series, I stopped at one point I think in this series. I was looking at video game releases, but sometimes the information's a bit patchy. I was just curious then when Ultima 1 came out. Wow. Officially released in 1981. What was that on then? Oh, the Apple II. Wow. Oh dear, now we've really gone down a rabbit hole. Yeah. Okay, I think I better stop there before I start into serious nostalgia here. So hopefully you enjoyed this as much as I did making these. Although these don't always get as much viewership as I like, they're one of my favourite videos to make just because they bring back so many cool musical memories. So thanks for those that persevere and watch these. I will catch you in a future video, so we'll flip-flop around from 81. The next one I'll do is more towards the end of the 80s. Bye for now, and catch you in the next one.